Well, I think you're completely wrong because I was at a yard sale and I bought a book. I bought a book. And it was 88 Reasons.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of 2 Feet Deep. We want to thank Silverman Sound for producing all of the royalty-free music that you hear in today's episode. If you're interested in experiencing some royalty-free music for yourself, head on over to silvermansound.com. We hope you enjoy today's episode.
How's it going, everyone? This is Eddie Brumley, and I'm here with Derek Markgraf. This is 2 Feet Deep, where we talk about all kinds of Christian concepts through a variety of ways. Derek, how in the world are you doing?
Man, I'm feeling good this morning. We got through all the storms. The sun is shining. The day is ready to rock and roll, my friend, and I'm excited to hear what you got planned for us today.
Man, so this one, I struggled with this one probably as much as any of the episodes we've written. I changed this one. This one was going to be about 4 different things before I was done. And I think I settled on the best options, but I'll leave that up to our audience to see what they think. And I guess I'll leave it up to you. So let's get started
Let's
with
do it.
entertainment exegesis. So I have been so swamped for time. Derek recommended a movie, a little brief movie series for me to watch on Netflix. It would have only taken a couple of hours to watch, and I still have not gotten to it. In fact, I have not watched anything on television in probably a couple of months. It's been that long. In fact, the last time I watched anything that would resemble a TV show or a movie was when we talked about Dune, and I remember how much you were excited to talk about that.
Well, hey, I've got it on my list to watch. I've actually went
All
back,
right.
I rewatched the trailers for Dune. My kids are actually excited about watching it too. So now it's just a matter of finding the time for us to sit down together and watch it together as a family. But we're excited about it. So I know that's a little change, of course, from where I was.
A little bit. Well, so I thought, well, if I don't have time for a movie, what do I have time for? And I came up with magnet fishing.
Hey, that's a popular thing right now. A lot
Oh,
of people
yeah.
really enjoy doing that. As a matter of fact, we were crossing a bridge. I live in a little bitty farm community, and you have to cross 20 bridges to get out of this town and get into civilization. And we were crossing some of those bridges, and one of them, these people are always fishing off of. And my son was like, I think we could magnet fish off that bridge. We don't even have magnet lines. We've never been magnet fishing in our lives. But he was like, I think we could magnet fish off that bridge. And I was like, I think I've seen people magnet fish off that bridge. It's become a real popular trend over the last few years to see what you can dig up.
Oh, man, it has. And I went down a rabbit hole last night. I watched a number of videos of these guys out magnet fishing, and all kinds of crazy stuff's happening. Uh, Mostly, they're getting a bunch of junk, right? They're getting trash, or getting just stuff that's accidentally ended up in the lake, like maybe a folding chair, maybe just scrap metal, a lot of trash. The guys I looked at first, it just looked like they were a cleanup crew trying to make the lake more clean. But eventually, you get onto some videos where they're finding some bizarre things. So they end up finding, of course, really interesting things like watches and other kinds of things, some things that really would be of value, they start finding things like guns, things that people have used in crimes and then just thrown in the lake hoping that they disappear forever. And in at least one or two, they had to call the police because it was evidence for crimes that had been committed. I mean, it's just fascinating and bizarre the kinds of things that end up in a lake or a river or a
I
body of water.
I watched some that actually even had government disposed, um, ammunition boxes and stuff that they had to call the police in because it was a major deal that these people had found something they weren't supposed to be finding. There's just a lot of stuff underwater, I guess, that we probably don't want to find.
Yeah, man. I mean, that is right. So, of course, I want to go do this. I want to get a big
Naturally.
magnet and a rope and whatever. I want to do this. And of course, I bet it's like treasure hunting is so much. My grandfather and I used to metal detect. And if you took 5 gold coins and just threw them out in a field, and then you knew approximately where they were, you still might not find them. When you're trying to cover every square inch of a field or whatever, it is a very, very tedious, difficult thing to do. And there are well-known treasures that are lost throughout the United States that they know the approximate locations, and people have, by the thousands have looked for these treasures for years and not found them. So the idea that you're going to get a magnet, you're going to go out and you're going to immediately just start finding hordes of cash or something. I mean, probably not. But just the thrill of uncovering who knows what, right?
Yeah. No, there's always the uncovering the mystery. And I mean, that's really what it's all about, no matter what kind of treasure hunt we're going on. I know that the geocaching was a big thing, I don't know, probably 10 years ago or so. And people love to discover even just what somebody else had placed out there intentionally for some other people to find. It was all about the mystery. What's going to be there when I get there, and that's what the treasure hunt's all about. And that's yeah, I mean, my son asked for a metal detector back when he was a kid. My oldest son, who's almost 20 now, asked for a metal detector back when he was a kid, and we got him one, and he had a ball just going around and finding junk. I mean, he'd pick up a screw and think it was awesome. you know,
Yeah,
there's just something fun about what kind of mystery can I uncover?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so the passage I had is deep calls out to deep from Psalm 42:7, and it's similar to another passage in 2 Corinthians where Paul says that only the Holy Spirit knows the deep things of the Spirit, and meaning not only God's Spirit but even our own spirit. That there are depths of mystery, there are depths of to be discovered, and a number of years Thomas Oden, one of my mentors in theology, he wrote a book and he said that there are 3 ways to be out of sorts when it comes to time. In other words, we can, just like in everything else, we can have a healthy relationship to time, or we can be diseased. And disease just means that you're not in sorts uh, with time. And he said, as it relates to the past, we can idealize the past and be trapped in the past because we think it was the good old days. Or we can be burdened by guilt over something that didn't go right in the past. As to the future, we can do the kind of the same thing. We can be very anxious about the future, or we can idealize it and think, oh, the best days are always going to be ahead of me. But as it relates to the present, Thomas Oden believed that boredom or the ability not to be able to cope with boredom was a spiritual sickness. Like if you ever grew weary of life itself, like you stopped being amazed by everything that's around you, even the most ordinary things are extraordinary and beg for an explanation. Their very existence says that you're a part of something that is absolutely amazing. And so I think there's something childlike about magnet fishing. I think there's something very deeply human about that, about just what is out there? What is there for me to see?
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I love that deep calls to deep. I
Yeah,
mean, and the mystery of what is in the depth that can only be revealed through the Holy Spirit. And if you take that on a very more shallow level, we're all on a search of discovery in this life. Oftentimes it's where we belong, it's who we are, what am I supposed to be doing? And those are all treasure mysteries that we're on, that ultimately we find peace and answers through our spiritual journey to Christ and with Christ, that I don't think that we find without him.
yep. And I think curiosity is one sign of a healthy soul. And so I see somebody who wants to go out magnet fishing, and they're just deeply curious about what's around them. I think that part of what we are as a species, we're explorers. We're
Yeah,
explorers. We we
well
we,
said.
we, we want we want to know what's out there. What's that out there around us? All right. Well, we're gonna move to what the what?
What the what?
So last week, you and I talked about, and it was the first time that we had really had a conversation about the idea of the rapture. And we both basically landed on we don't think the rapture is the best way to describe Jesus' second coming, though we believe in the second coming. We both didn't think that the rapture is the best way to describe that, though we didn't dismiss that idea completely. Today, I want to build on that a little bit because there are a number of well known preachers who think that if you take the information you find in Daniel, and the information you find in Revelation, and the information you find in the Gospels, that you can draw a timetable that'll give you an approximate date of when Jesus is going to come back. What's your thought about that?
Uh, I think that, I mean, that's a great question because, I mean, haven't there been tons of books written both on, Hebrew language, numerology, all of these different codes to be cracked in the Bible? I mean, I'm pretty sure there's a book out there called the Biblical Code. I'm almost, or something to that effect, that talks about these very things. And I ultimately think that there are definite scriptures we can look to that describe signs that reveal to us that the end times are quote unquote near. I think that if we're honest with ourselves, we may have even seen some of those in our present time. I don't think we'll ever be able to know what the exact time is. For example, when the disciples were running around talking about the second coming of Christ, they talked about how it was near. Here we are 2,000 years later, and we still haven't had the second coming of Christ. So, what does near mean? One, in terms of biblical timeline, and two, when Christ uses the very Jewish wedding language of saying no one knows when when the son will return, or only the father, which of course is reference to a Jewish wedding, and understanding when the bridegroom would return to the bride's village after he had gone away to prepare a place. And no one knew except for the father, because only the father would know how long it was going to take for them to prepare um, the house of which the newlyweds would live in. Is that same kind of idea? Only the father knows when the time is that the bridegroom will return for his bride. We know that we are the bride of Christ. So I don't think that any of us can ever pinpoint down the day. I don't think it's in there for us to even know. I think that there are simply signs that are saying we need to be on watch, which is my understanding of what the 10 virgins parable is in the Bible, when Jesus tells us about that. Is be on watch, be alert of what's happening, understand the signs that are given to us, know that second coming is coming, But I think that the idea behind it is to live ready, not live with a certainty of when that's going to be. That's kind of my thought.
Well, I think you're completely wrong because I was at a yard sale and I bought a book. It was I bought a book. It was 88 Reasons that Jesus is coming back in 1988, and
Yeah.
now and obviously I've missed it. So I mean, but
So funny. I saw your face. You said, "I think that you're completely wrong," and I was like, "Okay, Eddie." Then you go, "I was at a yard sale," and I was like, "You're so full of it."
but all right. The so just a few weeks ago we had the solar eclipse, and Stacy and I were driving over to an area where we can experience the full eclipse, and there are some guys with signs that basically say Jesus is coming back today. That's what this is, and if you don't repent, you're going to be lost at the end of the day. And and so it's interesting to me that even though everything you just said, which is Jesus' own words, that only the Father is going to know the time, that the right time, that there are Christians, and there always really have been Christians who still think they're smart enough to figure it out anyway.
I think that may call back to what our previous segment was. The Bible is a treasure for sure, and there are certain treasures within the overall treasure for us to discover. And I think that, like you said, that we're people who want the adventure of discovery, and I think for those people, I think maybe that's part of it. It's the desire to be on that journey and discover that treasure. I just don't
Yeah,
think that's not a treasure that we can find. I mean, I think the Bible's clear that we're not going to have that knowledge. But you know, if they want
that's
to,
a very generous. That's a very generous way of looking at those brothers and sisters of ours who are always trying to figure it out, right? And I guess you're right. I guess there is a part of the human mind. We want to solve problems. We want to figure out riddles. We want to be able to figure out how to fill in the gaps. Maybe it's a very natural thing that Christians would read the Bible and that at least some of them would say, "Surely there's some way to be able to figure this out." So that's actually a very generous take on it. The video I've posted for the show notes calls one preacher who regularly predicts it and gets it wrong that he's running the Rapture Racket. So he's obviously the guy that did the video is obviously not being as generous as you are.
well, here's the thing, and I know that we've mentioned this before. Christianity is not immune to the idea of doing what is necessary to make money, and
Yep,
there probably are people out there running a rapture racket. Just
yep,
honestly, we have to acknowledge that. So, in my generosity, I'm not naive. And
yep.
I know that there's people out there that are trying to make a buck. There's people out there that are, I don't know what their intentions. Maybe it's to scare people into following Christ, which I typically think is the worst way to have one come to Christ. I don't, but I can't speak for what others' motives are.
That's
But
exactly right.
there's a side of me that also wants to believe the best in humanity and say, hey, there's a natural side of us that wants to discover that truth. If I had thought that I could know that truth, well, I think it'd be fun to know it. I
Well, it
mean,
would be.
honestly,
It would be. Yeah,
I
of
just
course it would.
I just don't think we can.
Yep. And the other thing I always think is important to realize is that there are about 2.5 billion people who consider themselves followers of Jesus. Now, obviously, there's followers, and then there's followers, and then there's followers, right? But within a movement that's going to be that big, you can probably find almost anything, right? That's a big enough pool of people that you can find almost anything, and that doesn't mean that it's normative for our faith. It only means that it's such a big pool of people that you're going to be able to find almost anything out there you want to find. I mean, you're going to be able to find a pedophile. You're going to be able to find an insane person. You're going to be able to find a communist, a capitalist. I mean, you can probably be able to find anything within a pool of people that's 2.5 billion deep and wide.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely.
Which means that Christianity is always at least a little bit of a fun target, not only for atheists, but even for those of us that are within it.
Oh yeah, well, hey, you don't have to be a Christian very long to know that we do a very good job of targeting ourselves.
Oh my gosh, for sure, for sure. All right, are you ready for his name news game?
His name news game. My favorite, my favorite segment of the show every other week.
Yeah, well, man, I think I've got one for you today. I think I've got one for you today. This is from CBS News. Cicadas are making so much noise that residents are calling the police in South Carolina. Emerging cicada are so loud in one South Carolina county that residents are calling the sheriff's office asking why they can hear noise in the air that sounds like a siren or a whine or a roar. The Newberry County Sheriff's Office posted a message on Facebook on Tuesday letting people know that the whining sound is just male cicadas singing to attract mates after more than a decade of being dormant.
I, oh man, oh yours is so much better this week than mine's going to be for you next week. This is definitely one of the best. It's never even occurred to me that somebody would basically call in a noise complaint on nature. Oh my gosh. I just,
Could you people
yeah.
turn that down?
Oh, there you go. Why, why is the city running these sirens so loud all the time, night and day? Oh my goodness. Well, what's funny
uh,
too is when there's this many cicadas out, and they haven't come out here where we live yet, but they're supposed to. I think with by the end of July or something like that. I think is what I read, or June, one or the other. Um, it's not hard to see these giant flying creatures that are literally everywhere that you don't normally see. I mean, like the sound goes with this new sightings that we see once every 7 or 10 or whatever the particular year is of that breed of cicada that comes out in those increments. I don't. Yeah. So we got somebody that's calling in for questioning of why there is noise. Um,
And this year is particularly bad because it just happens that there's about 10 different breeds, 10 different swarms that their emergence has coalesced. So a whole bunch, probably more than has happened in a very, very long time in the United States. A whole bunch of these animals are coming up out of the ground in waves and in numbers not seen probably in our lifetime.
all right, I'm going to go with Psalm 46, verses 9 and 10, specifically 10. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. He says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." So, this idea of being still and knowing that God is God is always in my mind been this idea of the importance of taking time to sit down, let the world be pushed out, and remember that God is the creator of all things. that God's got this in a bigger picture than I can understand, that I can see, that I can even, sometimes even question. And so a lot of times the noise in our life distracts us from what's important and what is meaningful. And I find that when I am still and I remember that God is God and I spend time praying and talking with Him, that I seem to be able to shut out the noise and regain focus. Yes, these cicadas are going to be loud. Yes, they are noisy, but don't let the noise distract you from what's important in life. Um, they're just bugs doing what the bugs are supposed to do. There's no reason to get over concerned. There's no reason to panic. There's no reason to call people that have no control over nature. Just like there are times in our lives where we're overwhelmed with the noise and we just need to be still and know that He is God.
Wow. So last night I heard our youth pastor basically give the same message, and she was talking really to a group of kids. A lot of them whom are getting ready to go off to college, and she was telling them that there were going to be 1,000 ways to forget who they are, to get distracted, to lose their focus on Jesus. And she just called upon them to remember who they are, to remember who He is, to remember whose they are. And that seems very similar to the point that you're making. I mean, there is a lot of noise, there is a lot of distraction in our world, and and you can lose yourself in that. You can lose your mind in that, but you don't have to, right?
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. This is probably a lot deeper than that, but I was thinking about Elie Wiesel, who wrote about what it was like to survive as a human being from the concentration camps, and he said that one of the things they did in the concentration camps to break you was that they would give you work, and you would soon discover that the work was meaningless. So they would take you out and they'd show you this 10-foot mound of dirt. And they'd show you a wheelbarrow and they'd say, move it down 50 yards. We need it moved 50 yards. And you would spend your whole day in back-breaking work to move it 50 yards. And then the next morning they'd bring you back out and say, put it back where it was.
Mm-hmm.
And Elie Wiesel said that that kind of treatment broke countless human beings. But what he said the key to survival is remembering who you are, remembering purpose, keeping dreams and hopes before you, even focusing on what you will do if you can get out of this situation. What you intend to do: get married, start a job, go to school. That if you could keep focus on purpose and meaning, that you could move the hill 1,000 times and it'd never break you. But if you became focused on that hill and how meaningless it was, it would break you in a few days.
Mm, yeah, I can definitely see that. I can definitely see uh, because they're ripping your value away by saying, you're so worthless that you can do meaningless tasks and it means nothing. Um, and value is so important to our humanity.
Yes.
When I was in seminary, we had to go down into the homeless district in Portland, Oregon, where I went to seminary, and we were required to take $5 with us, and we were required to give it to someone who asked. But we had to ask them their name. We had to talk to them for the amount of time, whatever was necessary. And then after we had given someone $5, we still were required to stay there and find out other people's names who asked us for money. Tell them, no, we don't have the money. Ask them their name, ask them about their situation, and talk to them. Well, we got back into the debriefing, and the whole point of the exercise wasn't about the $5. It was about restoring value to humans because they said, how many times have you walked by a homeless person and just ignored them as if you couldn't hear them, as if they didn't exist? And you got to think this happens to them hundreds of times a day. And it said it's not about the money. It's about saying hello, asking a name. I don't have the money to help you. I'm sorry. Having a conversation and just helping restore their humanity. And that go so much further than $5 ever will.
It's interesting. Another thing that comes to my mind is this tidal wave of deconstruction, and where you question everything to death. You question it to the point that you soon can't find any thread of meaning. And postmodernists like Derrida first started trying to deconstruct by asking these very difficult questions of things like world history, U.S. history, art, literature, the religion of the West. And it's not that Christianity doesn't have a place for difficult questions, but there's a difference between seeking, faith seeking understanding and deconstructionism seeking to just dismantle everything. And nihilism grips so much of the Western world now because deconstruction has told this population over and over and over, your life doesn't actually have any meaning. It doesn't have any meaning at all. Thus, you know, sex is just a full contact sport. Money is just a tool to get pleasure. Families are just artificial constructs. Religion's just a story made up to control you, and eventually everything's dismantled to the point that nothing, you yourself don't mean anything. Your life itself doesn't have any meaning, and and I think that is a barrage of noise. It's a barrage of noise that and I think about if you've ever been too close to a siren when it's going off, how hard it is to think, how hard it is to orientate yourself because you're just being barraged by noise.
Yeah,
And yeah,
yeah. No, that's a great way to bring it back in to the cicadas, because I mean, what a wonderful tool that Satan has at his disposal, and we all are susceptible to it if we don't learn how to block out the noise and
yep.
remember that God is God on the throne. That's good
That's right.
stuff.
All right, you ready for eschatological AI?
All right, let's get brainy. Let's turn on
Yeah,
our brains and talk
yep,
about this future, past, present.
yeah. Future, past, present. So so Udio is a new tool that I believe OpenAI does that, and you can run it with ChatGPT, and Udio will create music, studio quality music. And so the video that I watched, they used ChatGPT to create the lyrics, and then they used Udio to turn it into music. So they would say, I want a song about pining for love, and I want it to be in the style of an old Motown music. Or, it's a rap song. I want it to be about bragging that my team beat your team, and I want it in the style of Eminem. Or, a brooding song about life and in the style of Nirvana or Pink Floyd. And so ChatGPT would create the lyrics, and this guy would have to make a few little corrections. There might be a line that he thought, that's not so good. So he'd ask it to edit a line or whatever. But when the lyrics were basically what he would want, he'd then go to Udio and he'd say, okay, I need this to be in the style of Eminem. I need it to be upbeat, danceable, and it'd turn it into that song. Or he'd say, I need this to be early Motown with with that signature bass and with horns in the background, and I want it to be sung by three females of African American origin, and it will create songs that you cannot distinguish from a human produced song. And so the video is, did AI just end music?
So this concept has been around for a while. I've seen other I've never heard of Udio, but I know that there's been other AI options out there. I mean, people have also been using AI to transfer voices and lyrics on top of other genres of songs. It's been done as a joke, and a lot of them are really funny. But I did know that this creative tool was out there. Well, it's funny though, because as you were telling me all this, we call them creative tools, and I've used Chat GPT. I think it's an excellent tool. Like if I'm struggling to find a concept that I really want to use in a sermon or whatever, I've talked to Chat GPT and taken some ideas here and there from it. Um,
Hmm.
it's kind of I wouldn't call it a whole lot different than trying to Google something and then searching through that of trying to find that. But this does borderline on robbing us of our creativity if we allow it to. And you just talked about, I think, was it in the first segment, how important the creativity is in our human existence, our curiosity, our exploration of what can I create, what can I produce, what can I do, and does this rob us of that? Is it going to be the end of us creating music? Never. You could never make me as a musician, which I am, stop creating music simply because there's a tool that can do it for me. However, for someone who may not be as confident about being able to write a song or to be able to create something, but they want to have the creativity to do it, maybe they limit their own creativity by using this. I don't know. It's definitely a fascinating tool. I've already pulled it up on my phone, and I intend to I intend to use it immediately after we get off here, simply because I want to discover it and learn all about it. So I say all that and then turn it right around and like, hey, I'm going to use this. What are you thinking? I can see the wheels
Uh,
turning.
well, so I'm picturing 4 years from now, but maybe it's too far in the future. Maybe it's 12 months from now. I don't know. Half the songs on the charts being generated by computers. Like, so maybe half the songs are by real artists like Ariana Grande and Dua Lipa and whatever, but equal number of them were just generated by a computer. And what does that mean? What does it mean
Well,
if
at some level, we kind of already do that to some extent. We we allow someone's creativity to be the root, though, and then we place a lot of computer sounds, a lot of computer direction. We place auto tune, which is computer oriented. So on some scale, we already do this, even with our live artists, even with our real artists. We produce computer oriented sound music beats. Uh, you know, and I think we have for a long time. I mean, is the synthesizer a real instrument, or is that a collaboration of different sounds? And if you've ever looked at how the first time a synthesizer sound was ever used, it was about using multiple different instruments and technologies being plugged in at one time to create this interesting new type of sound. So on some level, I think that we're already using computer to do this and have for some time. However, there is a difference if the AI is just creating the entire thing. Who gets the credit for that? If I go in and I told GPT to do this, and then GPT did it, and then I told UDO to do this, and UDO did it, am I getting am I getting the royalties for that hit song simply because I told it to do that when anybody else could have told it to do the exact same? I don't.
all right, so let's take it one step further. You're a record you're a record producer. The record company has you create a whole album using UDO and ChatGPT, and then they get their marketing department to create a video image of that artist, and they give that artist a name, and they produce videos, and the whole thing's a fabrication.
But again, don't we
And
already do that? I mean, what were the
well, yeah,
Archies? The Archies
Well, I
weren't
mean,
real. They were a computer generated. I mean, you could say computer generated. They were hand drawn.
right?
The gorillas today. I
Yep.
mean, the monkeys were essentially some element of that, even
They
though
were essentially
they, be,
that.
they became a real band. And I'm a Monkees fan,
Yep.
so I'm not taking away
Oh,
because
yeah,
they
I am
took,
too.
you
Same
know,
thing with Jonas Brothers, and originally Hannah Montana, though she had real talent, was able to
yeah,
really do things. So was Jonas Brothers, but this still feels different. It
it
still
does
feels
feel
different.
different. Yet I can see the tie-ins to things that we've already done that are the same sort of a thing. But definitely, it feels different because there's people behind the creativity of the gorillas. There's actually still people that are actually playing those instruments and singing those songs.
Yep.
Blur is still the people behind it that are doing it. You know,
Yep. So
the,
so
the Archies,
let's
there were
push.
some people in the studio that were singing
Still
those, and
playing the instrument and
yeah, and still
singing.
playing the
So
instruments.
let's push this even further. The record company takes five of you that are record producers and says, listen, real artists are too much pain, they cost too much money. Over this next year, you're going to create 10 new artists. And that's going to be our lineup for our record company for 2025. And they're all going to be computer generated from top to bottom. The only thing you're doing is giving the prompts to the computer and checking lyrics and making little changes here and there if you think one of the songs wasn't played right. But but every instrument's actually going to be computer generated. Every lyric is going to be computer generated. The person that the people see on the video is going to be computer generated, and that's going to be our lineup. We're not going to have any human artists except y'all, who are the creators behind these 10 fictional bands.
So, are you saying is the real fear then that they're like in this scenario, the record company has full control even over the creativity to where a live artist can't have a foot in the door because we're just having essentially computer engineers, essentially, call it what you want. Computer engineers generate fabricated music for the
Yep.
masses.
And it doesn't matter. I mean, because look, I think you're right. I think it's not like some of this hasn't always been the case with record companies and so forth. I mean, they've always sort of acted as a gatekeeper to what you got to hear or not hear. And part of what everybody loves about things like Spotify is it opens the gates wide open. You can discover anything you want. But these companies still have a lot of influence about what we listen to, and an artist is still going to go a lot further with a record company than they are, say, with SoundCloud, right? I mean, they might start with SoundCloud, but they're hoping to be signed by somebody. They're hoping that somebody with deep pockets takes an interest in their career.
No, I mean, like,
And yeah,
I think that you bring up a good point because, YouTube, Spotify, there's so many places now where there are uncontracted artists and people follow them and masses
yes,
follow them.
yes,
And, to a point where to some level they can, they earn some kind of paycheck from what they're
yep.
producing. Whether it's a livable paycheck or not, I don't know. I imagine that depends on the masses, the amount of people that are following. But to say, we are in an interesting time because the record company doesn't have full control anymore, which is probably extremely frustrating to them because there was a time when your music wasn't getting heard anywhere unless you happened to walk into a bar somewhere and see a live band that you didn't previously know that was local to the town. Outside of that, you had to be in the music industry to be heard. Where now that's just not the case. As a matter of fact, I would say the majority of my stuff that I listen to that's new music are artists that have 1,000 listeners a month on Spotify. They're not people that are in the music industry. They're creating their own stuff. So from that perspective, I don't think there's a real danger because we live in a world now that's open. Like you said, it's so open that I think it's a concern to the music, the record companies. But at the same time, maybe that's what will push the record companies into a place where they're only using their own creative engineers to create music and not need the artist, because why would they spend the extra money for an artist when they could probably spend a minimal amount of money to have somebody speak into GPT and just edit it, and then speak into UDO and then edit it and then produce a hit.
All right, so let me
I
ask
can
you
see,
one
I
more
can see
thing.
both sides of that.
Yeah, so let me ask you one more thing beyond really gatekeeper. Okay, let's just say that these tools are pretty easy to use, and 2 3 years from now, it's not even a record company. It may be some 19-year-old sitting in the basement of his parents' house creating some of these. Does it do anything to you to be in a place where you can never be sure if you're listening to a real human artist or something that was just generated by a computer? Does it matter? I mean, I'm not sure in my mind what I think about this, but does it matter to you if we get in a weird place where you can't really ever tell if it's a real human being or if it's computer generated? Because say they give this person a bio and everything, they can give them a backstory, and now you go to Spotify and you're discovering artists, but you can't really be for sure if you're discovering a human or something a couple fifth graders made.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna. Well, okay, no, but here's the thing: at this place in time, like the place I listen to music the most is driving, and right now, my family and I we drive a lot simply because of how far my kids go to school away from where we live. Which will be changing in next year, but for the remainder of this year, it's an hour away. So the majority of the place that I listen to music consistently is in the car. And in the car, I may put on, which we've talked about DJX before. And based off my listening types, he may suggest other artists that I would never heard of and will never see because I'm driving in a car. Yet I'm determining whether I like what he's suggesting to me just by listening.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, is that so different than, before TV when people listen to music on the radio? They didn't have an option to see the person. They listened to
yeah,
what was presented to them, and then they determined whether they liked it based off the sound only.
yeah.
Which
All
is
right,
kind of your,
let me.
which is kind of your question, but at the same time, does it matter that there's a human behind it? I don't think that the masses will care.
I don't think
Ultimately,
it will either. No,
I
I
mean,
don't
to
think
some
it will.
extent. Now, I mean, it's going to be different when Are we ever going to stop doing live concerts? I think there's a different element to watching a concert on, even with holograms that we use and stuff. It's fascinating and it's neat, but it's still different.
Yeah. So
You
okay, let
part of
me
the
let me push.
concept. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
All right, so let me push a little bit. Let me push a little bit. All right. What if DJX says, "Look, there's this band. They're out of Dayton, Ohio. Johnny, the lead singer, got started after a messy divorce and trying to recover from alcohol addiction, and started this band, and you start listening, you start identifying with Johnny, you start thinking, man, this is great." And say a year into really being a big fan of Johnny and his band, you discover that the entire thing's just been made up by a computer. Does that matter to you?
Does it matter to me that I know that the story of A Star Is Born is not real? Did that impact the emotion that I felt when I watched the movie and still when I hear the songs today?
Good point. Good
It
point.
didn't. It's a great story. It's a sad story. They produced some really cool music out of it, and the whole thing, none of it's real, of course. Which, I mean, that story's been told what, 4 times now since, I think, the early '50s. Maybe was the first time that it was. Maybe even before that, '40s, I think, was the first effort of that story. And so, I mean, on that one, of course, you go in knowing that it's not true. Okay, but like I just watched The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, I think is what the movie is
Yep.
called. Went with a good buddy of ours. Dave and I went and watched it. Loved it. Had a blast. At the beginning, this is based on true story. Of course, Hollywood is always like based on true story means there were people on a boat. you know. And it turns out that the true story is pretty much, the Hollywood version is what's true about it is there were some people on a boat that went on this mission. The rest of it is really blown out of proportion, but it made for a fantastic movie. And the fact that the movie wasn't really real, even though they were trying to sell it as real, didn't lessen how much I enjoyed the movie. I actually I will watch it again at some point when it comes out on streaming. I will 100% watch it again because I really enjoyed the movie. I went back and read the story of the actual event. It's really cool. It's a fascinating, phenomenal story all on its own. But to say the Hollywood story was the same would be a really big stretch. And I guess that, Hollywood's been pawning off on us that kind of a thing for a long time. This is based on a true story. Yeah, there was somebody by that name that did something, but oftentimes that's where the truth ends. you know, it's like a draw just to pull us in.
Another one for me that's like that, and I do love the movie, and I love the story, and I've watched it several times, and probably will watch it again several times. Is The
It's
Greatest
Chuck.
Showman? Oh, Chuck, that's right. I was thinking about The Greatest Showman, about the story about P.T. Barnum, but P.T. Barnum was not a really good guy, but
No,
he's a
no,
great guy, and in the movie he's a great guy, and he's a dreamer, and he's inspiring, and the story's inspiring, and it's heartwarming, and it's almost a complete fabrication.
fantastic movie, fantastic music. My daughter and I have watched it 100 times. If we've watched it once, we've watched it 100 times. Same thing with Newsies. Newsies is great, great. Now I will say Newsies is a little more tied to the truth, uh, because those actual events did take place. Other than none of them were dancing and singing in the streets, but but yeah, I mean exactly. But the PT bar, what did it do? It made me go research what the truth was. But the story itself was very loosely based on PT Barnum. Other than he did have some financial struggles. He did start essentially he exposed people for to gain wealth is what he
Yep.
ended up doing, and he did not treat them well. Where in the movie he treats them
No.
fantastically, and he's all about I'm fighting for their rights and their and fighting for my family, and none of that was true.
No, no, no. I mean, no. It's funny because I don't really have a way to land this one. We're on a topic where I think we could talk for a long time. I'll be honest. I don't for this last one. I don't have this great scriptural tie-in or a great landing point. And if anything, I think lots of times when we're talking about the eschatological AI, we're talking about the uncertainty of the future. And maybe okay, I do have a scriptural
As I
tie-in
say, I was
here.
going to tie it back into your deep calls to deep. It's that
Ooh,
continued
yeah,
search, that
yeah,
continued journey of discovering,
yeah.
who we
Oh,
are.
that's a great tie-in. Thanks for that. But I think where the additional one I want to give is the story of Abraham and Sarah. They were called to follow God, but God didn't tell them everything that was going to happen. He didn't give them a play by play. He didn't tell them how the story was going to work out. He only told them he was going to be faithful. He would bless their family and use their family to bless the world. But they had to journey with a lot of uncertainty, just as we do, with an open-ended future, trusting that God's going to be faithful in it.
Good stuff. Wow. That's a great, great, great example. And of course, you could go through character after character of that. Joseph certainly didn't have any understanding of his whole journey, yet
No,
it was definitely, definitely a God planned, laid out journey. And sometimes we don't know. We don't understand what's coming. We don't understand how it's all going to work, but we're here on the journey. We have to
that's
trust.
right.
Good
All right,
stuff.
brother. With that, I think we can call it a wrap.
All right, my friend. We'll see you next week, brother.
Bye bye.
Once again, we want to thank all of our listeners for joining us today on 2 Feet Deep. If you would like to reach out with any questions or thoughts, please email us at 2feetdeeppodcast@gmail.com. We hope you enjoyed today's show, and we'll see you next time.
Well, I think you're completely wrong because I was at a yard sale and I bought a book. It was I bought a book. And it was 88 Reasons.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of 2 Feet Deep. We want to thank Silverman Sound for producing all of the royalty-free music that you hear in today's episode. If you're interested in experiencing some royalty-free music for yourself, head on over to silvermansound.com. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.